So for centuries, history has told us this narrative, this deeply ingrained story, that King Solomon could magically converse with a hoopoe bird.
Right. It paints this very charming, almost ethereal picture of ancient governance.
Exactly. It's a nice story. But what if that bird was not, an actual bird?
Right. What if instead we are looking at a highly classified human intelligence officer?
An officer operating within a 7th century zero-noise data stream.
That is the crux of it. Because when we relegate these ancient texts to the realm of fairy tales, we build a sort of comfortable psychological barrier.
A barrier against taking them seriously.
Precisely. We categorize these narratives as myth, which conveniently excuses us from applying the rigorous operational standards we demand of our modern institutions.
Because magic is safe.
It's intellectually soothing to view history through a lens of magic because, well, magic cannot be audited.
And that is the exact premise we are dismantling today. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission today is to subject an ancient manuscript to a cold, strict, data-driven analysis.
We're looking at J.R. Ahmed's book, The Algebra of Revelation.
Specifically, his chapter decoding a highly specific alphanumeric signature found in the Quran. The signature is Ṭā-Sīn.
Right.
And I am establishing the framework for you, the listener, right now. We are completely discarding the folkloric assumptions. If a text claims to dictate reality, we want to see the mathematics of its governance.
Because Ahmed introduces a framework he calls the Algebra of Revelation. And his core argument is that the text possesses a highly focused modular architecture.
Structurally coded.
Exactly. It's structural. The two-letter code, the sin, appears exclusively at the opening of Surah An-Naml, which is chapter 27.
Right.
And Ahmed argues this functions as precise metadata for the entire module.
Wait, I have to push back on that immediately.
Go ahead.
Are we simply retrofitting modern technological jargon onto ancient theology to make it sound relevant? I mean, calling 2 letters from a 7th century manuscript metadata feels like a massive empirical leap.
It sounds anachronistic at first glance, sure.
How do we justify analyzing a religious text as basically a software architecture?
By observing how the text behaves mechanically. To understand the metadata, we have to look at what is actively excluded from it.
Okay, walk us through the exclusion.
In many other chapters, these alphanumeric preambles contain the letter mim. Systemically, within this specific lexicon, mim deals with the physical manifestation of matter.
So physical things.
Right. The cosmos, the tangible universe, the biological realities of creation.
So the presence of mim alerts the reader to expect a discussion on physical architecture.
Correct. But Surah An-Naml drops the mim entirely.
It's just gone.
The physical universe is excised from the header. The acoustic signature remaining, the Ṭā-Sīn is sharp, it's brief, and it is highly directional.
Acting as a systemic alert.
Exactly. It notifies the reader that the following module is dedicated exclusively to the invisible architecture of society.
We're talking communication protocols, intelligence management, and signal integrity.
Precisely.
Let us deconstruct that signal, starting with the first variable in this algebra, the letter, Ve. If it does not represent physical matter, what is the operational definition here?
In the structural lexicon that Ahmed outlines, de is the anchor for terms like ayib, meaning wholesome or sustainable, and ahara, meaning purity.
Okay.
We are looking at the principle of systemic equilibrium. The ayah denotes a state where a system is completely free from what the text calls uyan,
Which translates to transgression.
transgression, overstepping boundaries, or, in a data sense, systemic corruption.
So if we look at this through a modern telecommunications lens, I view the I as the pure, uncorrupted signal in a signal-to-noise ratio.
That is a perfect analogy.
Because in data transmission, noise is the distortion. It's the entropy, the corruption of the message.
Right.
Is the absolute mathematical elimination of that noise. It is pure data integrity.
And that analogy holds up perfectly under cross-examination with other parts of the text. Ahmed references Surah Al-Araf, chapter 7, verse 58.
What's the context there?
It discusses al-baladu, alayaibu, the good land. The pia represents an environment or a system that produces clean, uncorrupted, sustainable output.
But pure data just sitting on a server is useless. I mean, it has to be actionable. Having a zero-noise data stream does not automatically govern a state or secure a border.
Which necessitates the second variable in the algebra, the letter sin.
Okay, let's break down sin.
Sin is the semantic anchor for Salan, meaning authoritative proof or power. It also anchors SAM, meaning signal reception or hearing.
And Sabil the path.
Exactly. Systemically, sin represents the principle of regulatory authority.
But how do we know sin implies empirical proof, rather than just, autocratic power? Because authority in antiquity usually just meant whoever had the largest army.
It did. But the text explicitly pairs authority with the rigorous demand for evidence. Look at Surah Al-Kahf, chapter 18, verse 15.
What does it demand?
The text demands by sulinen bayanin, a clear, manifest authority. Sin ensures that information flows from the source to the components without distortion.
So any resulting action is justified by observable reality.
Not assumption and not ego.
We can synthesize the equation then. We have the sustainable, pure principle, plus sin, the authoritative law, based on proof.
Right.
Together, sin equates to the authority of the sustainable signal.
And the text immediately validates this mathematical combination. Right after these letters, the verse reads, "These are the verses of the Quran and a clear book, kitabin mubin."
So the letters provide the header, ensuring you understand the verses to follow, are the regulatory protocols of a functioning system.
It establishes the baseline ethics of intelligence gathering.
Now, theoretical variables are intellectually satisfying, obviously, but abstract equations do not run an actual geopolitical entity.
Yeah, they don't.
Does Ahmed provide a practical case study where this protocol actually governs a physical state?
He does. The text immediately transitions into the administration of Solomon Suleiman, and this is where the empirical analysis truly dismantles the conventional mythological reading. Surah An-Naml presents Solomon not as a sorcerer wielding magical powers, but as a highly advanced geopolitical administrator.
And this is where the mathematical logic of the traditional translation usually collapses for me.
How so?
Well, we just established the SN protocol as a rigorous, zero-noise data stream governing intelligence and empirical proof. But the traditional narrative immediately introduces Solomon talking to a flock of birds.
Right, the classic folklore.
Translating Solomon's operational interactions as a man chatting with wildlife introduces massive systemic noise into our reading.
It does.
It reduces a brilliant blueprint for statecraft to a hallucination.
While linguistically, the talking bird narrative is entirely unsupported by the root structure of the text anyway.
Walk us through the linguistics.
The word traditionally translated as birds is al-Tayr, but the Arabic root, ahar, simply means to fly or to move swiftly.
So rationally and systemically.
Al-Tayr does not refer to literal avian creatures. It refers to the swift cavalry.
The rapid intelligence and scouting division of Solomon's military apparatus.
Exactly. When Solomon states in verse 16 that he's been taught the language of Manika al-Iri, he is not claiming to speak bird.
No.
He is stating that he has mastered the complex communication codes, the cryptography, and the operational logistics of his high-speed intelligence networks.
He understands how to decode, organize, and manage this rapid data stream.
Right. His mastery is his ability to ensure his kingdom operates with systemic purity. The D through secure regulatory authority. The sin.
I really want you, the listener, to vividly reconstruct the auditory landscape of this moment in your mind.
It changes everything.
It does. Erase the ambient, peaceful chirping of a magical garden. Replace it entirely with the rhythmic, heavy thud of approaching hooves.
A military unit returning.
Exactly. Picture a disciplined scouting division returning from the frontier. Listen for the crisp, sharp rustle of sealed military dispatches being opened on a strategy table.
That is the true acoustic reality of Manika al-Iri.
It is the sound of an advanced military intelligence apparatus in motion.
And reframing the text that way is absolutely critical for grasping the geopolitical gravity of the chapter. Because if al-Tayr is a rapid intelligence network, it forces us to reevaluate its most famous operative.
Hudhud.
Hudhud. If the division is human cavalry, then Hud cannot logically be a hoopoe bird with a crest on its head. So who or what is Hudhud? Hudhud is a human intelligence officer. He is a specialized, commissioned scout operating within the al-Tayr division.
Which makes perfect operational sense.
When you apply basic geopolitical logic to the text, the literal bird interpretation becomes an absurdity.
Right.
Hudhud returns from the region of Sheba and delivers a highly sophisticated report. He comprehends complex political structures.
He identifies the existence and significance of a monarch's throne.
And he actively analyzes the theological implications of a foreign society's sun worship.
A literal bird cannot comprehend the socioeconomic vulnerabilities of a foreign civilization. It defies the very concept of the al-Sin pure signal. Furthermore, let's analyze the military justice aspect of this narrative. Before Hudhud returns, Solomon notices his absence.
He's missing from the formation.
And Solomon threatens him with severe punishment unless he brings a clear authority, a salinan mubinin, for his absence.
Verse 21 outlines this threat of punishment, up to and including execution with absolute clarity.
Let us apply the empiricist lens to that scenario. If a king executes a literal bird for missing a morning roll call, he is an irrational tyrant experiencing a psychotic break.
Right. It destroys any concept of systemic justice.
Completely. However, holding a commissioned military intelligence officer accountable for desertion or going AWOL.
That exemplifies flawless, disciplined governance.
An officer abandoning his post without authorization creates a critical vulnerability in the state's security apparatus.
And Solomon's demand for clear authority is the sin principle in action. He requires empirical justification for the breach in protocol.
And Hudhud provides that empirical justification upon his return.
He does. He does not offer excuses. He delivers verified data.
Let's look at the phrasing there.
In verse 22, the scout declares, I have encompassed in knowledge that which you have not encompassed, and I have come to you from Sheba with certain news.
The specific phrase used in the text is nabayin yakinin.
Verified news.
Verified news.
This moment is the exact operational embodiment of the SN protocol. The scout delivers pure, uncorrupted, empirically gathered data.
And he presents it directly to the governing authority, the sin.
Exactly.
And this is where the text proves its sophisticated understanding of statecraft. Solomon receives highly classified intelligence about a vulnerable, potentially adversarial foreign nation.
Sheba.
Right. Now, the standard mythological trope, or frankly, the standard historical reality for most monarchs, is that the ruler immediately marshals his army and launches a preemptive military strike based on this new advantage.
They act on ego.
Or blind emotion. But Solomon does none of that.
Because acting on unverified data, even from a trusted high-level operative, violates the algebra of revelation.
It introduces entropy into the system.
Precisely. Solomon must audit the data stream. This brings us to the sin validation.
The deliberate stress testing of the intelligence.
Exactly.
Walk us through the mechanics of that audit, because verses 27 and 28 detail it with surgical precision.
Solomon essentially says to his operative, we will see whether you were truthful or were of the liar.
He refuses to take the verified news at face value.
He demands a stress test. He issues a written diplomatic letter and commands the scout to deliver it, leave it with the foreign court, and observe their reaction.
Consider the operational parameters of that command.
They're immense.
The scout must infiltrate a foreign sovereign's court, deliver physical, written correspondence, and perform strategic espionage by analyzing their psychological and political response to the communication.
Which explicitly requires advanced human intelligence, literacy, and a deep understanding of diplomatic strategy.
You cannot send a hoopoe bird to conduct psychological espionage.
No, you cannot.
It is the ultimate standard for information governance. You do not authorize action until the data is stress-tested against reality.
And this sequence proves that this ancient text functions as an operational manual for establishing a secure state.
So what is the outcome of this audit?
The result of this rigorous protocol is the geopolitical shift of the Queen of Sheba.
Let's examine her state.
The text initially portrays her society as operating on what we might call a signal of adornment.
We need to unpack that. Explain what a signal of adornment or an entropy-bound system looks like in a practical sense.
Think of an entropy-bound system as a modern corporation running entirely on vanity metrics.
Okay, so optics over substance.
Exactly. They rely on PR stunts, superficial wealth displays, emotional decision-making rather than solid, audited financial data.
It looks prosperous on the surface, but its foundation is structurally decaying.
Sheba's society is characterized by sun worship and an obsession with their magnificent throne. It relies entirely on the visible and the superficial.
It is an irrational system lacking systemic equilibrium.
It is a society running on a corrupted signal.
And then Solomon's letter arrives.
Right. Through Solomon's careful, data-driven diplomatic correspondence, she's introduced to a contrasting reality.
The structural perfection of his state.
She observes a society where power is not arbitrary, not driven by ego or aesthetic displays, but governed by the sin.
The authoritative law rooted in verified truth.
She recognizes that his authority is not tyranny, but a manifestation of systemic peace. Or Islam too.
She abandons an irrational entropy-bound system for one that is empirically sound.
And that transition is the ultimate victory of the Ṭā-Sīn protocol.
It is not a victory won by cavalry charges, territorial conquest, and bloodshed.
No. It is a bloodless geopolitical victory won through absolute signal integrity.
That is fascinating.
The Ṭā-Sīn header prepares the analytical mind to look for these micro-laws of governance embedded in the narrative.
It demonstrates that a vast, sustainable empire cannot be run on myth.
It cannot be sustained by brute force. It must be run on verifiable data streams, secure communication channels, and absolute signal clarity.
As the chapter concludes in verse 79, the text summarizes the entire protocol. It states, "So rely upon Allah. Indeed, you are upon the clear truth, al-Nubun."
The clear truth is not some mystical, inaccessible state of being.
No.
Within this framework, it is the logical, mathematically inevitable result of pure data, the O being successfully gathered, rigorously audited, and transmitted properly through the governing authority, the Sin.
It forces us to fundamentally reevaluate how we view our historical archives. This analysis of J.R. Ahmed's The Algebra of Revelation reveals that magic is highly often just the historical misunderstanding of advanced systemic protocols.
Because when people in antiquity encountered a communication network so swift and an intelligence apparatus so precise that a ruler knew the vulnerabilities of a nation hundreds of miles away.
They lack the vocabulary to explain it.
Exactly. They did not have terms like signal-to-noise ratio or information governance.
So they called it magic. They concluded that he must speak to birds.
But the alphanumeric code at the very beginning of the chapter, the Fennis, was always there.
It stood as a strict mathematical guard against that mythological corruption.
It reminds us logically that in any system, whether divine or human, power without data integrity is merely tyranny.
It is a cold, brilliant, standard operating procedure for reality, waiting for a reader willing to audit the text rather than just passively consume it.
Auditing instead of assuming. That's the key.
And it leaves us with a highly provocative thought to carry forward. We began today by talking about the comfortable barrier of mythology.
How it protects us from analyzing the past too closely.
Right. But if an ancient text like this actually contains highly advanced standard operating procedures for information governance and military intelligence.
Disguised by the passage of time as mere fairy tales?
Exactly. It begs the question, what other myths residing in our historical archives are actually operational blueprints, just waiting to be decoded by the right empirical framework?